Welcome everyone to the second in the series called Mysteries of Creation. Tonight, we're going to be concentrating and focusing on different realizations, different hints and allusions and deeper dimensions that come from numbers. We're going to concentrate on different numbers in relationship with the telling of the story of creation in Parshat Bereshit. So we'll start with the structure of the first verse of the Torah. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So it's pointed out that there are 7 words and 28 letters. So right now we're going to concentrate on the significance of 7 and 28, but we're going to see shortly the relationship between 7 and 28. Now, again, as the evening goes on, we'll see that the Torah has a structure to it. It has a numerical code coded into the letters and the words and the verses and the parshas. You don't see it. You have to learn it or come to one's own realization. The numbers in all of the Torah, not just the story of creation, plays a huge part. For those who did our 70 Faces series, so we had 70 chapters of 70 different methodologies through which the sages learned the inner dimensions of the Torah. And I believe 21 of the 70 had to do with numbers. In other words, for thousands of years, the commentaries, the sages, the Kabbalists, the mystics, the Hasidic rabbis found deeper dimensions of the Torah through understanding the numbers. And part of that is the structure. How many letters in a word? How many letters in a verse? How many letters in a passage? How many words in a verse? How many words in a passage? So the first one we're looking at is 7 and 28. So the obvious connection of 7 words is there's 7 days of creation. And as we will see either tonight or probably next week, the idea that all 7 days of creation are condensed into the first day and into the first verse. And we'll delve into that sometime later. So the fact that the first verse of the Torah, which is telling us about the heavens of the creation of the heavens and the earth, which includes everything. The heavens represent all spiritual reality that would ever come into being, and the earth, Eretz, represents all physical reality that would come into being. So this is obviously connected to the 7 words, to the 7 days of creation. Now, what about the 28 letters? So here, it's hinted to in Rashi, the very first Rashi of the Torah. It's one of my favorite Rashis in the entire Chumash. And he begins with a rhetorical question. Why does the Torah begin with Bereshit? Why does it begin with Achodesh hazeh lachem? Achodesh hazeh lachem, this is the first of the months to you. This is the first mitzvah given to the entire Jewish people in preparation for leaving Egypt, in preparation for that first Pesach, for liberation. And the mitzvah was that this month, Nisan, this is the first of the months. But it's explained that along with that comes the entire understanding of time and the Jewish calendar. That's the first mitzvah. So Rashi asked rhetorically, because we know the Torah begins with Bereshit. So, but he says, like, why does the Torah begin with Bereshit? Shouldn't it have started from the first mitzvah? Because isn't the Torah a book of instruction? Isn't it a book of mitzvahs? So he answers in the following way, and he quotes a verse that says, Koach ma'asav higid lamo letet lehem nachalat goyim. The power of his deeds, he told his people, in order to give them an inheritance in the land, an inheritance among the nations. And Rashi continues. What does he mean? So he continues by saying, in the future, and this is written approximately 1,000 years ago. It was totally prophetic. He says, in the future, the nations are going to come to Israel. Now, when you have to understand, when Rashi wrote this, there were virtually no Jews in Israel. We had been kicked out like 1,000 years before. And there was a few remnants, but this is right around the time of the Crusades, where Muslims controlled the Holy Land. And then the Christians wanted to take it away, but the Jews were like not even part of the equation. And Rashi writes, in the future, the nations of the world will come and say to the Jewish people, you stole the land of Israel. What are we going to say? So Rashi says, that's why the Torah begins with Bereshit. So we will be able to say the same God who made heaven and earth, he gave the land to them, and then he took it and he gave it to us. That's the first Rashi. Now, it's totally prophetic, because why would anyone say you stole the land? We're not, when he's writing it, we're not in the land. We don't control the land. But he saw that in the future, we would return to Eretz Yisrael. And then just look at the discussions in the United Nations for the last 70 years. Listimatem, you stole the land. How many times have we heard that in the United Nations? You stole the land. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because the verse that Rashi quotes as his proof text is Koach ma'asav higid lamo. The power of his deeds, he told his people. The word power, koach, is 28. So Rashi is alluding to the fact that the 28 letters of the first verse that testifies that God created the heavens and the earth, this is the koach, the power of his deeds that he told his people. That's why the Torah has to begin with Bereshit. So we'll have what to say in the future when they say, Listimatem, you stole the land. So that's an amazing understanding of Rashi. Now, this structure of 7 words and 28 letters appears again in a very important verse, and that is the verse that introduces the 10 Commandments. The verse that introduces the 10 Commandments is exactly 7 words and 28 letters. Vayedaber Elokim et kol hadavarim ha'ela le'mor. And God spoke all of these things, saying. Now, when you hear that, you would say, what's so important about that verse? It's like, it doesn't sound like it's saying very much. Right? And God said all of these things, saying. And then it begins, I am the Lord your God who has taken you out of Egypt, from the house of bondage. But what our commentaries tell us, there's a midrash that says that God said to the Jewish people, If you receive the Torah today, good. If not, I will return creation to tohu vavohu. I will return the world to chaos and void. Meaning that the whole purpose of creation was that, this is God speaking, that I can reveal the Torah into the world, because this is the purpose of the world, and the purpose of the Jewish people is to take the Torah and then teach it to all the nations of the world. So the fact that the verse introducing the 10 commandments is the same structure as the first verse of creation is tying those two things together. And this is connected to the sixth day, where it says, every day, the end, it says, Vayhi erev vayivoker, Yom Echad, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi. It was erev, it was evening and it was morning, one day. It was evening and morning the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day. The sixth day, there's something different about it. It says, Vayhi erev vayivoker, Yom Ha-Shishi, with a hey. Ha-Shishi, the sixth day. The others don't say Ha-Sheni, Ha-Shlishi, only Ha-Shishi. How does Rashi explain that? So Rashi says that this is hinting to another sixth day. Which sixth day? The 6th of Sivan, the day that the Torah is given. So here, Rashi is telling us that the conclusion of the 6 days of creation are connected to Israel receiving the Torah on the 6th day of Sivan. So this is all to explain these two verses that have the same structure, 7 words and 28 letters. When you look in the Balaturim, he explains hundreds of verses by how many letters are in the verse and how many words are in the verse. So this is a known method that the sages use to analyze the text. Okay, so now I just want to make one other connection. I already alluded to it, and we will get to it this week. There's another connection between the 10 commandments and the creation, and these two verses that really introduce creation, introduce the 10 commandments. And that is what I already said, that, and Rashi quotes this, Rashi says explicitly that everything that would ever be created was already created on the first day. And in the 7 days of creation, just each day revealed what was already there in potential. Now, this is a very old teaching. Rashi brings it, but he didn't make this up. This is a tradition, that everything that would ever be created was already there in potential on the first day. So the importance of this now is how science describes the creation of the world. Science cosmology, the Big Bang, is that everything that would ever be created, every galaxy, and now we know that there's at least 10 billion galaxies, and each galaxy has approximately 10 billion stars. And science, this is like what Rav Ginsburg says. Rav Ginsburg says the most mystical ideas right now are coming out of science. And science tells us all of that was in that infinitely small speck that the Big Bang. But that's what Rashi already said 1,000 years ago. Everything that would ever be created was there in the first day. So what we're told is that all 7 days of creation are condensed into the first day of creation. The first day of creation is condensed into the first verse. The first verse is condensed into the first word, Bereshit. That's why the first verse tells us that 2 things were created, heaven and earth. But this represents all the dualities. Heaven is the spiritual, earth is the physical, but that represents all dualities, all polar opposites. And so the whole first word, which is 6 letters, it's 6 letters, but in the word, if you permute Bereshit, you have the word Shabbat. So you have the 6 days of creation in the 6 letters of Bereshit and Shabbat. Bereshit spells Yira Shabbat, the awe of Shabbat, or Ya'er Shabbat, the illumination of Shabbat. And all of that is condensed into the first big bet of Bereshit, because those are the dualistic, pluralistic reality of our world. Now, many people ask, why did the Torah begin with an Aleph? And so some of the explanations is that Aleph is the first letter of the 10 Commandments, Anochi. And that again connects creation with the giving of the Torah. Now let's look at the Tzimtzum, the condensation that happens in the 10 Commandments. If you look at the 10 Commandments, the first 10 Commandments, there's 620 letters. And that's Gematria Keter, by the way. That the Torah is coming from the highest place, in the Keter. We know that there's 613 mitzvot. So it's explained that these 620 letters there's 2 explanations, are the 613 mitzvot. Each letter represents a mitzvah. And the 7 that bring us to the 620 letters is either the 7 mitzvot of Bnei Noach, the children of Noach, or it's there's 7 mitzvot from the rabbis that have the status of being a Torah mitzvah, even though they're from the rabbis. Because 6 of them, when we make a blessing on them, we say, Asher Kiddishanu, that you commanded, speaking to God. But God didn't command them, the rabbis did. But nonetheless, they used the phrase, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav. And very quickly, these are, when we read the Megillah, that's the blessing that we say. But the Megillah is not in the Torah, but it has a status as if a mitzvah in the Torah. When women light candles on Shabbos, Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav. Well, it's not commanded in the Torah. It's not one of the 613 mitzvah. And Hanukkah lights. And Hallel, when we say Hallel, we say this blessing, Asher Kiddishanu. I think I named 4. I didn't think I was going to do this, so I didn't prepare all of them. I'm thinking quickly. Oh, Netilat Yadayim. When we wash hands, we say Netilat Yadayim. And all the brachas that we say, even though we don't say Asher Kiddush Shanu, all of the blessings that we make, all are from the rabbis, but like I said, they have a status as if given by God himself. So this is all to explain that, in a sense, the 10 Commandments includes all of the mitzvot, the 620 letters. And in fact, I believe it was the Kamana Rebbe. He actually wrote a book where he took each letter of the 10 Commandments and proposed which mitzvah was connected to that letter. I mean, can you imagine what a brilliant work that must have been? He went through the entire 10 Commandments and said, this letter represents this mitzvah, and this letter is that mitzvah. That's like a brilliance kind of beyond comprehension. Okay, but then, so we have all of the mitzvah. Then we're told that we have two types of mitzvah. We have what are called positive mitzvot and prohibitive mitzvot. So there are 365 prohibited, meaning don't do X. It's forbidden to do X. There are 365 of those, and there's 248 positive mitzvot. Yes, my wife just put a chat that there's Rashi Tevot for those 7 mitzvah called Na B'Simcha, like travel with joy, move with joy, these 7 mitzvot. So we're told the first of the 10 Commandments is I am God, your God, which is the belief in one God and God's providence. And the second one is in the negative. There shall be no other gods before me. So all of the mitzvot, in a sense, are condensed into these 2 mitzvot. All of the prohibitive ones are linked to the second mitzvah of the 10 Commandments. And all of the positive ones are for the first. Again, the first one is, I am God, your God who has taken you out of Egypt. That represents all the positive mitzvah. And you shall have no other gods before me represents all of the prohibitive mitzvah. And then there's another condensation, and that is the first word is Anochi, I. And it says in the Zohar that each one of the letters of Anochi, Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud, stands for a word. It's Rashi Tevot, an acronym. Ana nafshi kativat yahavit. I have written myself down and given myself to you. That's the acronym of Anochi. Ana katvit. Ana nafshe kativ yahavit. I have written myself down and given it to you. So that is the ultimate symptom that God's will is condensed into the letters of the Torah. Then we have one more to go. Just like the first word Bereshit is now condensed into the Bet of Bereshit, everything is condensed into the Aleph. Everything is in the Aleph, in the oneness of God. Okay. Okay, next, we are going to look at the numbers 3 and 4. And we're going to start with the number 4. So Rav Ginsburg explains that in many words, verses, there's a whole underlying understanding of the relationship between numbers and ratio between numbers. So I mentioned that the first verse is 7 words and 28 letters. So that is a ratio of 4 to 1. That is the ratio, 4 to 1. So Rav Ginsburg explains a lot about what one might think is, okay, 7 words, 28 letters, there's a ratio of 1 to 4. Now what? So he explains in great detail that, again, because we have this idea that God looked into the Torah and created the world, the Torah is the blueprint of the world. So if the first verse has a relationship of 1 to 4, so that obviously is very important. So it's 1 to 4 or just the number 4 itself. In other words, 7 times 4 equals 28. So here, we'll continue with first the relationship of 1 to 4. So that we see in the 2nd chapter of Bereshit, in the 6th verse. The verse before that, the 5th verse says, this is talking about after the creation of man. No, this is actually before. Again, this is the second telling. In fact, for those who were here last week, we learned there's a first telling, and then there's a second telling, where especially about the creation of mankind. So here in the 5th verse, it says, before there was any greenery in the fields, and before there was any grasses and herbs in the fields, before, now remember, they were created on the 3rd day. Vegetation was created on the 3rd day. But here the Torah is coming and saying it had not sprouted yet. In other words, God created the potential of all vegetation on the 3rd day. But here the Torah is clarifying that nothing had sprouted yet. Why? Because it says, because God had not caused rain to fall on the earth. And there was no human being to work the earth. So I'm not going to delve into the great depths of this verse here, because it has to do with the whole power of tefillah. That's what Rashi says. Why didn't anything grow? So the verse says, because no rain came. So why didn't any rain come? So the verse says, because there was no human being. And Rashi says, well, what's the connection? Rashi said there was no human being to pray for rain, that everything should grow. So obviously that has deep implications. But the next verse, that's what I want to get to. It says, Ve'ed ya'aleh min ha'aretz. A mist. The Onkelos says actually like a cloud. But we understand it's like a mist rose up from the earth, and it watered the face of the earth. And then it says, and then God created man from the dust of the earth, and he blew into his nostrils the breath of life. I'm bringing all of this just to look at the word aid. And a mist arose from the earth. This word does not appear in the Chumash again. And look at the letters, Aleph, Dalet, 1 to 4. And this is a critical verse because it's saying, this is even before the creation of man, there was no vegetation. And this mist arose and it watered the face of the earth. And then God could create man. In fact, Rashi says it was like kneading dough. He was the dust of the earth was like the flour, and the water was like this egg. And God created it. Obviously, this is very symbolic. God created man from this combination of the water and the dust of the earth. So this word is very important, and it has a relationship of 1 to 4. Then just a few verses later, in Yud, in 10, chapter 2, verse 10, it says, V'nahar yetzeh me'eden, and a river came out of Eden, v'hashkodet hagan, to water the garden, u'misham yipared v'haya la'arba rashim. And from there, it split into 4 rivers. And then the Torah goes on and explains the names of the rivers and descriptions of them. But here, look what we have. There's one river that splits into 4 heads, 1 to 4. Again. Now this in modern physics has an incredible connection, because we're told there are 4 forces of the universe, 4 basic forces of the universe. This is accepted by all science, is gravity, electromagnetic force, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. But what we're told is, and Albert Einstein, he worked with this very much, and he tried to find a formula that would unify these 4 forces. Because when you look at these 4 forces, they appear to be very different. And he had a very deep belief that it was all one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear Israel, God our God, God is one. He intuitively understood that the physical world had to all be part of a greater oneness. Today, the quest is called the theory of everything. But, and by the way, science has unified 3 of the 4. They understand now how 3 of the 4 forces work together, and the relationship. The one they haven't figured out is gravity. They have not figured out how gravity works with these other forces. But I'm mentioning all of this because we're told that right after the Big Bang, all 4 of those forces were one. They were not 4 separate forces. And only as the universe expanded and began to cool, each of the 4s took on call it a life of its own. So this is the one river that splits into 4 other rivers. It's a very, very profound idea here. Now we have one other, 1 to 4, a very important one, is a relationship between the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life, Eitz HaChaim, in Gematria is 233. Eitz HaDat Tov V'Ra is exactly 4 times 932. Exactly 4 times. So here you have in these 2 archetypal cardinal trees that represent so much about the human predicament, human existential reality. The relationship is 1 to 4. And then we have, of course, God's 4-letter name, from which everything comes. Remember, we have the verse, Shaviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. I place God before me at all times. And so Rav Ginsburg explains on a deeper level what this means is not just I am conscious that there's a God in the world. I'm conscious that that God's providence is everywhere. It also means that I understand that all of reality is a manifestation of the 4 letters of God's name. Shaviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. I understand that everything is coming from these 4 letters, Yud and Hey, and Vav and Hey. So again, we have the 4-letter name of God. But interesting, we have really, there's another level, and that's called the tip of the Yud. In Kabbalah, there's the 4 letters of God's name, and then there's the tip of the Yud, 1 to 4. The same thing with the worlds, that the common understanding is that there are 4 mystical worlds, 4 Kabbalistic worlds. Atzilut, from above to below. Atzilut, emanation. Bria, creation. Yetzira, formation. Asiya, action. The 4 worlds. The world of emanation, the world of creation, the world of formation, the world of action. And then the Arizal comes and explains that there's really a 5th one, one higher, called Adam Kadmon, primordial man. And we could go on and on, because Rav Ginsburg explains the idea of from the ancients really till today, the idea of understanding the world according to fire, earth, air, and water. And all of the astrological signs are considered either fire, earth, air, or water. These are the basic elements. In a more, call it chemistry kind of way, you have solid, liquid, gas, and combustion. You have hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. Those are the 4 cardinal elements. Hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. And then even the way we describe all of creation is either inanimate, vegetable, animal, human. Everything is in 4s, the 4 seasons, just the 4 directions. Everything is connected to 4. So now we're going to, in a sense, take it even one step deeper here, is in Rav Ginsburg's book, which I showed everyone last week, called 913, the secrets of creation. 913 is the gematria of Bereshit. So Rav Ginsburg has a whole chapter, and he says, kind of like, what do you think is the most important number in creation? Oh, good. Sean's going to hold it up, right? So everyone can see. There it is, 913. A lot of what I'm teaching, I said last week, is from going through this book in the last few weeks. So he has a whole chat, like, what number do you think is the most important? So there are 2 numbers that we could think of, and that's the number 7, because the 7 days of creation, and the fact that when we look at Jewish law, Jewish tradition, and Jewish custom, the number 7 comes up all the time. It's like in all of our rituals, it's just everywhere, the number 7. Also the number 10. We have the 10 expressions to which the world is created. We have the 10 sfirot, because it's all coming from the 10 sfirot. We have the 10 commandments. We have the 10 plagues. We have the 10 tests of Avram. We have the 10 nations that make up what was called the larger Eretz Yisrael. So many things with 10. But Rav Ginsburg says there, in a sense, those are true, but there's an even 2 more basic numbers. And that's the numbers 3 and 4. And I'll do my best to explain. If you remember, we started this class with the idea of there's a structure to the words and verses and passages and parshas of the Torah. So the first thing that Rav Ginsburg points out, if you look at the first verse of the Torah, it's true, it has 7 words, but what I call the ta'amim, the way that we sing the Torah, we chant the Torah, is virtually every verse, there's a few exceptions, has what's called an etnachta. And etnachta, we would call it a comma. In other words, almost every verse has 2 parts to it. Almost every verse in the Torah. There'll be the place where you pause. And that's really important, because if you pause in a different place, you could read the words differently. So the first verse of the Torah, the etnachta, comes after 3 words. And then there's 4. Bereshit bara Elokim. Etnachta. Eta Shemaim ve'eta Aretz. So Rav Ginsburg says the structure, there's 7 words. But if you want to get down even like a deeper lowest common denominator, it's broken up into 3 and 4. He also points out amazingly that the word in Hebrew, shlosha and arba'ah, together equal 913, equal Bereshit. So you have it's encoded in the word Bereshit 3 and 4, shlosha and arba'ah. Okay, now he points out another thing, and that is, see, we already talked about the importance of 4. So in other words, everything that we just said about 4 in relationship to creation can now be, in a sense, cut and paste into 4 as the lowest common denominator of the structure of the Torah. All of those 4s have a profound effect on all of creation. Here we're adding, though, the number 3 and in relation to 4. So the Ramban talks about this, Rav Ginsburg talks about this. In the beginning, the first verse says, and God, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. But it's asked that, like at the Big Bang, at the bet of Bereshit, like what changed? Before that, there was just the infinite oneness of God. And then there's a creation. Well, what changed? So all the commentators say 2 things. Time and space were created. Because before that, there was no concept of time as we know it. And there was no concept of space as we know it. So even before the heavens and the earth, implied in the first split second, or you can imagine, let's say, the quill hits the cloth and begins to form the bet, well, that first dot, that's the beginning of time and space. So Rav Ginsburg points out that in time, remember, we looked at the Rashi, and Rashi said, why doesn't the Torah begin with the first mitzvah that we received? And the first mitzvah is about time. This month is the first month of the year, but we learn what that really means is God was giving over to Moshe the importance of time and how to calculate the Jewish calendar. And the Jewish calendar has a 19-year cycle because, as you may know, we have a lunar calendar. The lunar calendar is approximately 11 days shorter than the solar calendar. So if it was only a lunar calendar, it would be like the Muslim calendar, where holidays are not connected to particular seasons. In other words, in the course of many years, Ramadan will come out 11 days earlier each year. So one year it could be in September, the next year it's in the middle of August, the next year it's the beginning of August, the next year it's the middle of July, until it goes all the ways around. The Jewish calendar is also a lunar calendar, but we unify it with the solar calendar. And the only way to do that is 7 times in 19 years to add a leap month. That is how we unify solar and lunar calendars. These are both important. They both have important realities to them. So Rav Ginsburg points out the numbers, so meaning there's 12 years that have 12 months and 7 years that have 13 months. So 7 is made up of 3 plus 4. And 12 is made up of 3 times 4. So he explains that, again, he's getting it down to like the lowest common denominators of structure in the world. For example, just like in science, you look at the world, and if you didn't know any science and someone said, well, how many forces do you think there are in the world? So let's say you didn't even know any of them, but you'd probably say millions, billions of forces in the world. And yet science says basically there's 4 forces. There are 4 forces. That's what holds everything together. So Rav Ginsburg is getting down to the most basic structure on which creation comes into being. Now, of course, these numbers then they get transferred and translated into spiritual concepts. So we just did one with time, that the 19-year cycle is made up of 7 and 12. And again, 7 is 3 plus 4, and 12 is 3 times 4. Now, of course, with the 12 regular years, so this is also connected to many other 12s. The 12 astrological signs, the 12 months of the year, the 12 hours of day, and the 12 hours of night. And then when you get into the Sefer Yetzirah, there's also the 12 senses that are connected to the 12 months. And then you have the 12 simple letters. And so you have 12, but 12 again is 3 times 4. And then we have another beautiful connection is that, one second. So now let's take also these numbers And like I said, these numbers, since they're so important to creation, are going to manifest themselves in many spiritual ways. So one way is the breastplate of the high priest. The breastplate of the high priest was made up of 12 stones, but they were figured, there's 3 per 4 rows. So you have 3 rows, you have 4 rows, but there are 3 in each row. So again, you have the 3 and the 4. That's the secret of the breastplate, is a relationship of 3 and 4 and to 12. Of course, that's connected to the 12 tribes. Now, how do we get the 12 tribes? This is a Gewalt. How many Avot do we have? 3. How many Imahot, how many patriarchs do we have? 3. And how many matriarchs? 4. 3 times 4 equals to 12 tribes. And then you have the way that we camped in the desert. This, of course, is so full of importance and symbolism. But 3 tribes camped in the 4 directions. That's how we camped. And there's many, many, many teachings about the importance of this structure. Now, the great Kabbalist, Avram Abulafia, so he revealed one of the gematrias of Bereshit that no one else had really thought of. Bereshit equals 913. He said the term Shlosha Devarim Yachad equals 913. Shlosha Devarim Yachad means 3 things together. That equals Bereshit. So the question, what did he mean? So we have spent most of the time talking about 4 and 3 times 4. But here, Avram Abulafia was saying that there's something very special about 3 things together. And so for those who know about the Sfirot, so the whole secret of the Sfirot is that they're in 3 columns. We're told in a previous world, either the Sfirot were in circles, like an onion, one around the other, or one on top of the other. But this world, called Olam HaTikun, is symbolized that the Sfirot are now in 3 columns. That's the importance of the number 3. Now, there's a well-known midrash that says in the 3rd month, I'm not quoting exactly, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember which order it is, but in the 3rd month, after 3 days of preparation, the 3rd sibling gave a 3-tiered Torah to a 3-tiered people. So what does that mean? The Torah was given in the 3rd month, Sivan, after 3 days of preparation, by the 3rd sibling, Aaron, Miriam, and then Moshe. Moshe was the 3rd in the family, to a people who are made up of 3 segments, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. And eventually it would be known as a 3-tiered Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. The Torah, the prophets, and the writings. So these are all the three. Now, a number of times in the Torah, the Jewish people are called Am Segula, a special people, a precious people. The word Segula comes from the word Segol, which is a triangle, a triplet. And so we're told, in fact, for those who are part of 70 Faces, we learned this, that why are we called a Am Segula? Because we know the secret of the triangle. We know the secret of the triangle. And the triangle is connected to the vowel, which is called the segol. This is the vowel that's called the segol. And we're called an Am Segula because we understand the secret of the segol. And that can be understood in modern terms, but this comes from a much deeper source, what is called, get it right, it's called thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. This is reality. All of reality is like this triangle, and we know that the Sfirot are a combination of different triangles. One triangle, another triangle, another triangle, another triangle. It's just a series of triangles, but the important thing is it's 3 lines. That represents tikkun. Rectification represents taking 2 opposites and unifying them. So I think this will be a good place to stop for tonight. We did not get through all of the numbers, not by far. We will continue with that next week. And then after the numbers, we will go into many, many, many other aspects of the mysteries of creation. For right now, we will simply end with a bracha that we should continue to delve into the Torah and to keep learning and to uncover the mysteries of not just creation, but the mysteries of life and the purpose of life, and each and every person to find their place and their purpose in the bigger picture.